Hello student, in this video lesson, I will explain you class 7 ncert books chapter The Invention of Vita Wonk. Let's start the chapter. Mr. Willy Wonka begins by inventing Wonka White. Mr. Willy Wonka invented Wonka White, which makes people younger. After taking Wonka White, any person become younger. But Wonka White is too strong. But this medicine was too strong. So people disappear because their age become minus. After taking Wonka White, people disappear because this medicine was very strong. One person actually becomes minus 87, which means he's got to wait 87 years before he can come back. Whose age was 87 year become minus 87. It means he has to wait to come back for 87 years. Mr. Willy Wonka must invent a new thing. Now, Mr. Willy Wonka has to invent something new. Mr. Wonka said, "So once again, I roll up my sleeves and set to work." Roll up my sleeves means once again he was ready to do work. Once again I squeeze my brain searching for the new recipe. Now I is Mr. Wonka. Mr. Wonka is saying then he was again thinking very hard to invent something new. I had to create age to make people old, older, oldest. Now Mr. Willy Wonka want to invent something which makes people old, older and oldest. Ha ha, I cried. Mr. Wonka cried. For now, the ideas were beginning to come. Now for that, the ideas were coming in his mind. What is the oldest things living in the world? Now Mr. Willy Wonka asked Charlie, what is the oldest living thing in the world and what lives longer than anything else? A tree, Charlie said. Now Charlie replied, a tree. Right you are, Charlie. But what kind of tree? Now Mr. Willy Wonka asked Charlie, you are right. Tree lives longest, but what kind of tree? Not the Douglas fir, not the oak, not the cedar. No, my boy. It is a tree called the bristlecone pine that grows upon the slopes of Wheeler Peak in Nevada, USA. Now Mr. Willy Wonka told Charlie that not Douglas fir, not oak, not the cedar lives longest. It is bristlecone pine which lives longest and it grows on the Wheeler Peak in Nevada, USA. You can find bristlecone pines on Wheeler Peak today that are over 4,000 years old. He informed Charlie that on the Wheeler Peak of Nevada, USA, you can find 4,000 years old bristlecone pine trees. This is a fact, Charlie. Now he said this is a fact. Ask any dendrochronologist you like. Now Mr. Wonka said Charlie he can confirm it from any dendrochronologist. Dendrochronologist is a person who study about trees. And look that word up in the dictionary when you get home. Will you please? And he also said to the Charlie that he can find this word bristlecone pine tree word in the dictionary. So that started me off. Now he said to Charlie to help him in his work. I jumped into the great glass elevator and rushed all over the world collecting special items from the oldest living things. Now Mr. Willy Wonka went to the glass elevator and collect all the things which he collected from the oldest living things in the world. First, a pint of sap from a 4,000-year-old bristlecone pine. Mr. Wonka collected sap. Sap is a liquid which comes from the tree. Mr. Wonka collects sap from 4,000-year-old bristlecone pine tree. Second, the toenail clippings from a 168-year-old Russian farmer called Petrovich Gagrovich. Next, he takes the toenail of a 168-year-old Russian farmer Petrovich Gagrovich. Third, an egg laid by a 200-year-old tortoise belonging to the king of Tonga. After that, he takes the egg of a 2,000-year-old tortoise, the tail of a 51-year-old horse in Arabia. Next, the whiskers of a 36-year-old cat called crumpets. After that, he takes the whiskers. Whiskers are the hairs which grows on the face of a cat or a rat. Mr. Wonka takes these hairs of cat crumpet, which was 36-year-old. After that, an old flea which had lived on crumpets for 36 years. After that, he takes flea. Flea is an insect which had lived on crumpet, the cat, for 36 years. The tail of a 207-year-old giant rat from Tibet. He also takes the tail of a giant, means big or large or huge rat from the Tibet, which was 2007-year-old. The black teeth of a 97-year-old Gramkin living in a cave on the Mount Popocatépetl. After that, he takes the knuckle bones of a 700-year-old Catalu from Peru. Knuckle bones are the bones where finger joins with the hands. Catalu is a kind of animal. All over the world, Charlie, Mr. Wonka went on. I tracked down very old and ancient animals and took an important little bit of something from each one of them. Mr. Wonka said Charlie that he went all over the world and find oldest animals and he take little bit something from each one of them, a hair or an eyebrow, or sometimes it was no more than an ounce or two of the jam scraped from between its toes while it was sleeping, and sometimes he take the liquid part between the toes of the animal. Track down the whistle pig, the bobbling, the siroc, the polyfrog, the giant curlicue, the stinging slug, and the venomous squirrel who can spit poison right into your eye from 50 yards away. Now, Mr. Wonka told Charlie about some animal from which he collected something. There's no time to tell you about them all now. Now, Mr. Wonka said to Charlie that now he had no time to tell Charlie. Let me just say quickly that in the end, after lots of boiling and bubbling and mixing and testing in my inventing room, I produced one tiny cup full of oily black liquid and gave 4 drops of it to a brave 20-year-old Oompa Loompa volunteer to see what happened. Now, Mr. Wonka said he gave 4 drops to a brave 20-year-old Oompa Loompa volunteer to see the result. What did happen? Charlie asked. Now, Charlie asked Mr. Wonka what happened after drinking that 4 drops of that liquid. It was fantastic, cried Mr. Wonka. Mr. Wonka was very happy and he cried it was very good. The moment he swallowed it, he began wrinkling and shivering up all over, and his hair started dropping off, and his teeth started falling out, and before I knew it, he had suddenly become an old fellow of 75. Now Mr. Wonka told Charlie that when Oompa Loompa swallowed the fourth drop of that oily black liquid, he suddenly started trembling. Shivering means trembling and wrinkling. His skin became wrinkled and his hair started dropping and his teeth also started falling out, and before he could understand anything, he became an old fellow of 75. He was 20 years old, but after taking that oily black liquid, he became a person of 75. And thus, my dear Charlie, was Vita Wonk invented.